In a flash of brilliant color, a young warrior in red and white armor unleashes a powerful attack, his sword engulfed in flames. He shouts the name of the technique, Breath Edge, his resolve clear. No matter how hopeless the situation, he will press on. This memory, fragmented and glitching, plays out like one of the upbeat hero sagas popular these days, a story where there are no bad endings. In it, the hero and his blonde companion stand together against a colossal, horned demon. His face fills the darkness, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. He struggles to recall the name of his favorite game, the words garbled and indistinct as the memory slips away. That tear falls into a void, its impact sending a ripple across a still surface, marking a transition from the depths of his dream. With a faint groan, his eye flutters open. A gentle voice reaches him, announcing that he has finally woken up. He blinks, his vision focusing on a young woman with blonde hair leaning over him. She looks at him with concern and asks, "Luke, are you okay?" He can only stare back, confused, still lying in bed. He watches as she places a hand on his forehead. "How's your fever?" she asks, gently chiding him not to give her that look. He remains silent, wondering who she is. He raises a hand to the bandage on his head, a flicker of familiarity in his gaze. He feels like he's seen her somewhere before and manages to tell her he thinks he's okay now. A warm smile spreads across her face as she expresses her relief. She offers him some fruit, explaining it's a gift from the family of a child he saved. Seeing his confusion, she reminds him of the events of the previous night. He had rescued a drowning child from the river, returned soaked, and then developed a fever the next morning, all while insisting he would travel as usual. As her words sink in, the memory returns. He falls back against the pillow, exhausted, admitting to himself just how tough it had been. He remembered the events of the previous night. While returning from patrol, he had seen a child being dragged away by the river's current. With monster sightings on the rise, he had jumped in to save the child without a second thought. But this memory of a village felt wrong, disjointed. A wave of confusion washed over him as he questioned what village he was even thinking about. The thought solidified into a starkly different image. He shouldn't be in a village at all. He should be in his studio apartment back in Tokyo. As these two conflicting realities battled in his mind, the memories of his daily life in this village suddenly flooded back, becoming sharp and clear. He was in a simple room, lying in bed. The young woman beside him spoke, her voice gentle. She remarked that it was rare for him to have such a fever. She knew it was his habit to jump in and help people without thinking, but she pleaded with him not to make her worry so much. At that moment, he realized he remembered her, but not from his life in the village. A name suddenly burst from his lips as he shot upright in bed. Aisha. The girl jumped, startled by his sudden outburst. Her surprise gave way to a faint blush. She confirmed that was indeed her name, Aisha Ventima. He stared, the recognition solidifying. Aisha Ventima, one of the heroines from the game Legend of Spirit. Her own expression was one of pure confusion as she asked if he had truly forgotten the name of his childhood friend. His gaze shifted past her to the window, and in the reflection, he saw not his own face, but the face of the game's protagonist, Luke. There was no mistaking it. The truth began to dawn on him. It all came crashing down. He had been reincarnated as Luke Ventima, the protagonist of his favorite game, Legend of Spirit. He recalled the game itself, a popular, upbeat hero saga. He had always been a sucker for stories like that, despite being just an average, underachieving guy himself. This was it, the so-called Ice Guy reincarnation. He recalled the game's protagonist, a hero who overcame every difficulty with his wits, talents, and strength. It was the kind of perfect, happy ending he had always loved. This memory solidified his confidence. He knew for a fact that there were no bad endings in Legend of Spirit. The realization sent a jolt of pure excitement through him. He sat bolt upright, fists clenched, and shouted that his future was basically guaranteed. His sudden outburst startled Aisha, who let out a small cry of surprise. His excitement immediately gave way to embarrassment. He broke out in a sweat and apologized, realizing he had shouted inadvertently. Aisha, looking concerned, asked what was wrong, noting how weird he was acting. Now that he understood his situation, he knew the first thing he had to check, to orient himself in the timeline. He turned to Aisha and asked for the current date. As she handed him a piece of peeled fruit, she replied that it was the second month of the spirit year, 703. He processed this, realizing with relief that it was still some time before the game's main story was set to begin. This knowledge was his greatest asset. He remembered his past life, sitting before a screen, having played the main game countless times. He knew everything. How to get stronger, the locations of every item, and the timing of every event. A thought took root. From this point forward, he could manipulate how the future would unfold. His thoughts turned to the game's darker plot points. While not outright bad endings, he recalled several serious, tragic events in the timeline. He remembered characters who were never rewarded for their efforts, and even a heroine who was tragically turned into an enemy. A new resolve formed. This time, he might be able to save them. This resolve filled him with a powerful sense of purpose. Clenching his fist, a blush of excitement on his face, he declared that he would save them all. His goal was to achieve a happy ending even better than the original. Aisha, still watching him with concern, asked if he was really okay, to which he gave a simple, confident yeah. Inside, he felt his burning gamer soul being fueled with excitement. He turned his beaming smile directly to her. "I'm all right, Aisha," he said with conviction. "I'll definitely make you happy." His sudden, heartfelt declaration caught her completely off guard, and she could only stare back, blushing deeply as she uttered his name. He quickly amended his statement, adding with a fist pump that he would make the others happy as well. But his initial focus on her had already had its effect. Aisha remained flustered, her hand pressed to her chest as she tried to process his words. She looks at him, bewildered by his sudden intensity. Finding his behavior strange, she urges him to go back to sleep. Startled by her presence, Luke calls out her name in surprise. Over the next few days, he surveys his surroundings, confirming his suspicions. There is no doubt, this is Limer Village, located in the Laurempia Kingdom, the world of Legend of Spirit. He walks past a large building, his thoughts turning to his past. He and Aisha grew up together in the Ventima orphanage, which is why his name is Luke Ventima. Though they share a family name, they're not related by blood. He finds a clearing and begins to practice. He recalls from the game's story that the original Luke trained every day before his journey began. For now, he decides simple swinging practice will have to be enough. As he continues his drills, a realization strikes him. With every swing, the next move comes to him naturally, his body seeming to understand the motions on an instinctual level. He pauses, confirming his suspicion. The original Luke was a truly gifted swordsman. He can feel the immense gap between this innate talent and his own ordinary previous life. But he knows that with his foreknowledge of the story, he can make the best use of this gift. A confident smile touches his lips. In fact, he might even become stronger than the original. But he reminds himself that the most important events are still to come. His focus sharpens as he recalls the game's timeline. It won't be long before monsters attack the village in an event that serves as a skill tutorial. He resolves to defeat them, if possible, before anyone can be harmed. He drives his sword into the earth, stealing his resolve. The memory of the game's short tutorial, defeating the monsters that swarmed the village, is clear in his mind. He must become stronger before that inevitable attack. His intense focus is broken by Aisha's voice. She approaches, her expression filled with concern, asking if he is truly well enough for his usual training. He turns with a smile, assuring the worrywart that he's fine. She remains unconvinced, pointing out that he's been acting weird and using odd phrases ever since his fever, suggesting he should rest if he's not feeling well. She observes that he feels different, noting how she's had to correct his phrasing lately. Gripping his sword, Luke tells her he's fine and asks her to stop bothering him, thinking it's easier to act like his usual self. He knows, however, that she always detects the act, and her expression sours. He reflects on the original Luke's dismissive attitude toward Aisha, a behavior he can only mimic because of their close bond as childhood friends. Still, he finds it difficult to maintain the facade. She changes the subject, remarking that he's training with his sword as usual. His demeanor shifts instantly as he enthusiastically confirms that it's his dream to become a hero, a declaration he often makes. She acknowledges his earnest dream, adding that it's a dream they all share. Seeing him, she asks if he plans to continue, and he confirms he is nearly finished with his training for the day. Taking the opportunity, she suggests they go on a picnic together to the flower field near the lake. To her surprise, he agrees, and she points out that he always turns her down because of his training. He playfully asks if she's changed her mind, realizing he might have upset her. Her suspicion returns, and she thinks to herself that he is definitely acting strangely. Despite her suspicion, a blush spreads across her face as she firmly declares that she is coming too. He is momentarily struck by her charm, thinking to himself how cute she is before telling her he'll get ready. His mind flashes to the original game, recalling the many heroines the protagonist could meet, from holy saints to princesses. A short while later, she emerges from the house, having changed into an outing dress with an apron. Apologizing for the wait, she holds up a basket, announcing she made sandwiches. Luke is once again captivated by her appearance. He internally praises her kindness and dedication, remembering how she supports the original Luke from start to finish in the story. Recalling how many players were won over by her innocence, he resolves to pursue the Aisha route. He watched as Aisha cheerfully called his name, beckoning him to follow her as she ran ahead. Catching up to her, he listened as she remarked on his recent odd behavior, though she admitted she was happy to hear his words. He responded with newfound confidence, assuring her there was no longer any reason to fear rejection. Clenching his fist, he declared his ambition to become a hero. Her face lit up with a radiant, affectionate smile. She confessed how much she loved seeing him so determined and urged him to continue working hard and looking toward the future. Their conversation was interrupted by a calm voice calling both their names. They turned to see an older woman in a nun's habit, and Luke, flustered, tried to backtrack on his previous statements. The director chuckled, explaining she had only come to ask them about tomorrow's patrol, but her tone shifted. She noted that it was nearly time for them to leave and asked directly if they still intended to take the entrance examination for the Cygrus National Magic Academy. His mind flashed back to the catalyst for this plan. He remembered it clearly, the first major event. A month prior, 2 letters had arrived from an unknown sender. The director elaborated on the contents of those letters. They were invitations to the prestigious Cygrus National Magic Academy in the capital, the same institution attended by the hero who ended the Great War a decade ago. She confessed her worry, unable to understand how the academy found them both, musing that it could be a simple coincidence. Despite her concerns, Luke and Aisha were resolute, agreeing they had to go to discover the reason for the invitations. He recognized this as the entry point into the main story of the Legend of Spirits, a world he knew was filled with contrivances. He understood that investigating the reason for the invitations was the key to overcoming the challenges ahead. Observing his expression, the director remarked that his mind was clearly made up. A nostalgic smile crossed the director's face as she looked at them. She admitted it would be lonely in their absence, the memories stirring within her. The reality of their impending departure settled in his thoughts. As they walked away, the director called out, reminding them that she was still counting on them for the patrol the next day, and they readily agreed. He sits with Aisha on a bench overlooking the water, remarking that it still feels strange even after saying it himself. She quietly agrees. His attention suddenly shifts. He asks Aisha if she said something, but she looks at him, puzzled, and denies it. He is certain he heard a voice. The voice was a premonition, a stark warning of an approaching threat. This was the event that would foreshadow the awakening, a sign that the end had begun. In an instant, a monstrous creature lunges from the foliage, only to be met with a decisive, crushing blow. As the beast falls, Luke stands over it, sword in hand, expressing his shock that such a creature would appear so close to their home. Aisha, standing behind him, wonders where it could have come from, as she has never seen a monster like it before. He lowers his sword, his arm trembling and numb from the exertion. The reality of a true battle sinks in. It was far more difficult than he remembered from the game, where this encounter was merely a tutorial. Aisha watches him, her thoughts turning to the fallen creature. She initially believes that even a normal person could have won, but quickly dismisses the thought, realizing that Luke's talent is what is truly formidable. Her contemplation is cut short as Luke turns to her with an urgent expression. He declares that the fight took longer than it should have, and that they must return to the village immediately, a deep worry etched on his face. They race back, only to find their fears realized. The village is swarming with monsters. Luke stares in shock, realizing he was too late. A villager, axe in hand, rushes to them, explaining that a horde of monsters appeared suddenly and attacked. In the chaos, they were unable to find the director. Hearing this, Luke's focus sharpens. As the villager asks where they are going, Luke tells Aisha they must head for the orphanage, remembering that in the game's version of events, it was never attacked. He breaks into a run, shouting the director's name, determined to save her. A hulking, horned monster holds the director captive, its claws digging into her habit. She cries out to Luke and Aisha, warning them not to approach, insisting the creature is far too strong as it lets out a monstrous roar. Seeing the beast, Aisha wonders what it could be. The director again urges them to run and save themselves, but Aisha hesitates. Luke, however, finds this unacceptable. He refuses to flee and abandon the director. He steps forward resolutely, sword in hand, and declares to Aisha that they will fight the monster to rescue her. He feels that his current self possesses the strength to make such a promise. With a powerful war cry, he charges toward the beast, closing the distance in an instant. As he rushes in, Aisha provides support from behind, casting a spell. A jet of water slams into the monster's face, causing it to cry out in surprise. The distraction creates an opening. Luke reaches the director and yells for her to run outside to safety. He then turns on the monster, bringing his sword down with all his might. The blade shatters against the creature's hardened skin. In retaliation, the monster hurls a spinning projectile directly at Aisha. As the projectile flies, Luke analyzes his opponent, noting its nimbleness and dangerous claws are on another level entirely. Still, he feels there's no way he can lose. The director calls out his name, reminding him that he is the protagonist of this world, the hero of the future. Just before the attack can strike Aisha, a wall of fire erupts and intercepts it. She cries out in shock. Luke turns, surprised to see the flames originating right beside him, and thinks to himself what a close call that was. He looks to the source of the inferno, asking who is there. A massive, fiery being declares itself to be Salamander, the great fire spirit. As Aisha and the director stare in awe, it is revealed that the four great spirits who created the world have been unseen for centuries, and one of these legendary beings now resides within Luke. He eagerly accepts the spirit's offer, urging Salamander to unleash its power. This moment marks the beginning of a grand journey for the young boy from a small village, now partnered with one of the four great spirits. The horned monster recoils, stunned by the sudden appearance of the fiery entity. The spirit's power erupts, striking the monster with concussive force and eliciting a guttural scream. It is foretold that this is only the start. Luke is destined to meet the other three great spirits and eventually become the new spirit king who will save the world. Despite the blow, the creature shifts its focus, its malevolent gaze locking onto Aisha. Luke instantly perceives the threat, realizing the monster is now targeting the young woman. He knows he must act, and calls upon Salamander to lend him its power once more. He channels the spirit's energy, causing his blade to ignite. This is the prologue to his story. With intense focus, he commands the wild flame to become a blade sharp enough to cut down evil. With the command given, he lunges forward, unleashing the breath edge, a sweeping arc of pure fire that cuts through the air towards the monster. the first definitive strike of his fated journey. The fiery attack dissipates. He stands for a moment, savoring the intoxicating feeling of power, but his expression sours as he realizes the monster somehow evaded the strike. From behind him, Aisha's voice cuts in, questioning what he means by evaded. Her question hangs in the air as a strange thought surfaces in his mind. In the game, this strike should have defeated the monster. It was, after all, just a tutorial for the skill. As this incongruous thought forms, a dark splatter of liquid stains the ground before him. The splatter confirms his internal dissonance. The battle should have concluded the very moment he used the breath edge skill. But it wasn't over. The horrifying truth is revealed as Aisha gasps, a dark, sharp appendage having pierced clean through her torso. The thought echoes in denial. It shouldn't have been able to avoid that attack. Her body goes limp. Blood trickles from her lips as her eyes begin to glaze over, life fading from them. With what little strength she has left, she whispers his name, Luke. As she lay dying, dark ichor dripped from the monster's massive arm. In the distance, Luke stood motionless, his sword in hand, his form small against the backdrop of the carnage. His stillness shattered into a primal scream of denial and rage. He roared the name of his attack, breath edge, over and over, a desperate, broken mantra against a foe that was already defeated. As he raged, the director's hand closed firmly over his own. She pleaded with him to calm down, pointing out that in his blind fury, he was only hurting himself, his knuckles white from his death grip on the sword. She held him back, a lone figure of calm amidst the devastation. Before them lay the bisected corpse of the horn monster. A short distance away, Aisha lay motionless on the floor. He struggled against her grip, his mind reeling. Why? He whispered, the question turning into a desperate, agonized shout of Aisha's name as the director tried to soothe him. Breaking free, he rushed to her side, kneeling over her still form. Blood stained her dress and lips, but her eyes were open. She looked up at him and spoke, her voice weak but chiding, reminding him that he knows better than to cry. He stared, stunned by her words. She continued, her voice a faint whisper, reminding him of his destiny. He is going to be the hero, and this is no time or place for tears. Despite her words, tears streamed down his face as he stammered in protest. She looked at him, a faint, sad smile on her lips, and asked him not to make that face. It was, she said, so unlike the Luke she knows. He choked out her name, unable to form any other words. With the last of her strength, Aisha laid out her final wishes for him. To see the world for her, to go to the academy, to meet people, try new foods, and one day, to find someone to love. As his face crumpled in sorrow, she recognized the boy she had always known. There you go again, she whispered, the usual Luke. For one last time, she asked him to see her off not with tears, but as he always has. Her body lay still on the cold wooden floor. Luke knelt beside her, his voice a choked whisper as he called out her name, hoping for a response that would not come. He reached out, his mind refusing to accept the truth. Blood stained her lips, her eyes were closed, unseeing. The realization struck him with the force of a physical blow. She was dead. His denial was immediate and fierce. This couldn't be real. He insisted that this was the Legend of Spirit, a game he knew inside and out, a game that had no such tragic ending, no bad end route. Then, a desperate hope seized him. He remembered the rules of the world he thought he knew. He could bring her back, he realized with sudden certainty. Resurrection was possible with water magic. He turned to the director, his eyes wide with renewed purpose. He explained that they could still save Aisha this way, confident that no one else in the kingdom possessed the ability to wield such high-class magic. The director's response was a quiet, somber dismissal of his hope. She explained that it was futile, even if they could acquire a life fruit. Such an item could only work in the immediate moments following death. Her words hung in the air, extinguishing his last ember of hope. The light faded from his eyes as the grim finality of the situation settled upon him. The truth was inescapable, written in the very lore he had once trusted. In the Legend of Spirit, there was no story where someone long dead could ever truly return to the living. There was no way to bring Aisha back. She was gone. The realization shattered him completely. A raw, guttural scream of pure agony tore from his throat as he collapsed to the floor. His grief turned to rage, and he demanded to know why Salamander, the Great Spirit, had not used its power to save her. He continued to rave, his words making little sense to anyone but himself. He insisted that they had rescued her, that in the original story, there shouldn't have been a problem. It was just that they were one step too late. The director, listening to his frantic talk, could only ask what he meant. He clenches his jaw, a single, agonizing thought consuming him. His sword, if only his flame had made contact. The implication of that failure begins to dawn on him. The horrifying certainty crashes down upon him. He stares at his own hands, his face a mask of anguish, as the realization screams through his mind. It was his fault. His mind recoils, flashing back to a conversation with Aisha. He remembers admitting to her that his choice to prioritize her over his training wasn't entirely selfless. He had simply wanted to take the easy way out. He now understood the terrible price for that selfish choice. The vibrant, smiling face of Aisha, full of life, was now replaced by the still, silent image of her death. The memory fades, leaving only the brutal reality. He looks from his hands to Aisha's still form, the weight of his conclusion crushing him. It was all because of him. Aisha was dead because of him. He doubles over, a wretched sound escaping his throat as the director calls out his name, urging him to get a hold of himself. But her words don't reach him. He thinks to himself that they don't understand. They were all just acting as they should within the game. He was the only one who had deviated from the original story. Tears stream down his face as he silently apologizes to Aisha. He laments that the real Luke, the protagonist, was supposed to be a hard-working hero. But he had been naive, spoiling himself, and living leisurely. He realizes with despair that even after being reincarnated, he was still just himself, not the protagonist he was meant to be. The weight of this failure reduces him to a small, isolated figure kneeling in the darkness. He is no protagonist, he tells himself, just a nobody in a world built for an invincible hero. Lost and broken, he wonders what he is supposed to do. He questions his own ability to carry on. How could someone like him, a mere background character, bear the weight of being the main character? The burden is too much. A single, desperate desire fills his mind. He wants to run away. But as he spirals, Aisha's dying words echo in his mind. That's so unlike you, Luke. The memory strikes him with the force of a physical blow. He understands. She was right. He realizes that if he gives up, the story itself will end. Even if he wants to run, there is no choice but to push forward. He now understood his duty, to become the hero Aisha wished him to be. He had to protect and rescue others, to turn to them when they needed him. He acknowledged that a weakling like himself could never be the main character. So he had to get stronger and shoulder the burden of living as Luke. His heart and body were too weak now. So he resolved to train hard, pushing himself through hell until even death was no longer a fear. He would act like the real Luke, believing from the depths of his heart that a singular focus on heroism was the correct way to live. He would devote everything to this cause. He swore an oath to use all his knowledge and resources to overcome every hardship and pursue the ideal of the true hero, Luke. A voice affirmed his resolve. Standing in a shallow pool of water, he asked aloud, "Salamander, what is my name?" Though the question was sudden, the voice from his reflection answered without hesitation, "You're Luke." In that very moment, he cast aside his old self. He accepted that this was his core duty in this world, the one path he was destined to walk. He would put on a mask and play the part required of him. He would play the part of the hero, the protagonist, Luke. He would do it all for the sake of the people he was destined to meet in the future. With newfound conviction, he declared his identity to the world. "I am Luke Ventima," and so he walked forward. This was the story of an ordinary person desperately trying to play the role of the strongest hero. This story, the legend, was only just beginning. Elsewhere, a hooded figure gazed into a glowing orb. They offered an apology, confirming that Salamander had indeed formed a contract. A nearby voice expressed shock, questioning how it was possible for someone other than His Highness to make a pact with one of the four great spirits. They reported their findings, confirming that the contract was with a young boy, Ventima, though they admitted to some uncertainty. The hooded figure briefly considered their next move, wondering if they should simply eliminate the boy. After a moment of thought, they dismissed the idea. Their superior affirmed the decision. He explained that killing someone contracted to a spirit can cause significant problems, as it is difficult to separate the two once a pact is made, a truth doubly potent when dealing with a great spirit. He had hoped to secure the entity before it formed a contract, but now, the only course of action was to retreat. When questioned about this choice, he confirmed the plan had changed. Fortunately, another target was available within the same kingdom. Gazing out over the capital city, he gave a new command: to go and secure the sleeping wind great spirit, Sil. In a sun-drenched memory, Aisha dances through a field of white flowers, exclaiming how beautiful they are. Luke, kneeling nearby, gathers a bouquet for her as he calls out her name. The bright memory fades, leaving him kneeling in the present before a simple stone grave marker nestled among the trees. He turns to see the director standing behind him. She observes that he is setting off on a journey, and he quietly affirms it. She then asks if he intends to go alone. Turning away slightly, his hand drifts to the black bow pin to his collar as he replies that he is not alone. He explains that Aisha is right there with him. As he speaks, a translucent image of her appears by his side, a gentle smile on her face. He looks back at the director, his expression confident. She stares back, her own face a mask of surprise. Her surprise softens into a warm smile. She tells Luke he is strong and hands him a small parcel, explaining that Aisha's share is inside too. Now ready for the road with his pack slung over his shoulder, Luke declares his strength once more and sets off. The director bids them both farewell, but as he walks away, his confident facade crumbles. He is not like her, he thinks, his mind replaying a different, darker memory over and over again. The memory is of Aisha, bloodied and dying on the floor. She had pleaded with him not to be like her, that the burden was too heavy. If only she had trained her own arm more, she lamented, she wouldn't have died. Her final words echo in his mind. She believed in him, right until the very end. The weight of it all is immense. He stands frozen, unable to take another step. He feels he must carry her sorrow, that he wants to be locked away and comforted. Though he knows he must not stop moving forward, something holds him back. He gasps, his eyes wide with anguish. He stands motionless on the forest path, his expression somber. A voice, unheard by any but him, breaks the silence, asking if he is all right. It is Salamander, who notes that he looks quite pale. He quickly composes himself, a wide, almost forced smile replacing his melancholy. He turns and insists he was just lost in thought, thanking the spirit for its concern. He then playfully calls Salamander worrisome, but cute, prompting a flustered denial from the spirit that it was ever worried to begin with. As he chuckles softly to himself, the spirit's voice continues, remarking on his sudden brightness and questioning if he is making fun of it. He starts down the path, his stride purposeful. The spirit observes that his arrogant demeanor has returned, just like his old self. The spirit's words stop him in his tracks. It asks what that display was, pressing him on which persona is his true self, the one he's showing now, or the somber one from before. His gaze falls to the ground. The spirit explains that as his contracted familiar, its consciousness awakened to his about 10 days before their pact was officially formed, and even then, it understood. It continues, revealing a fundamental truth it has perceived. Its master has 3 distinct faces. The spirit clarifies that besides itself, only Luke knows his true nature. It describes one face as brimming with masculine confidence, and the other as the dark, brooding persona he showed just moments ago. His hand clenches the strap of his bag as the spirit poses the inevitable question: which one is the real master? It is a question he must answer, for he now has to perform the role of Luke and deceive everyone he meets. He turns, a disarming smile on his face and his hands spread wide in a placating gesture. Sorry, he says this one is. As he speaks, the great fire spirit acknowledges their ability to read each other's hearts. Yet, it realizes that even with this connection, the thoughts deep within Luke's mind remain hidden. A problem far more complex than it first appeared. He decided there was something he had to tell Salamander from the very beginning. With a strained expression, he apologized, explaining that his negative personality was his true nature, even if it meant being disliked. He confessed that without maintaining this lie, he couldn't find the correct answer he was searching for. The spirit's response came as a shock. To his surprise, Salamander declared that they actually prefer that side of it. It continued, noting that no matter what happened, he was always forward-looking. While his passion was audible, Salamander felt his perfection made him seem less human. Salamander elaborated on its love for humans, how they stumble, suffer, and yet still carry their pain forward. It was for this reason, the spirit explained, that it wanted to become his power, not for the sake of Luke, but for the man who admitted he was nothing like the real one. He called out to Salamander, his face breaking into a warm, blushing smile. He thanked the spirit, genuinely happy to hear its words. His gratitude, however, was short-lived. His expression shifted as he looked down, murmuring, but, before looking up with a grimly determined smile. He turned and began to walk away. As a spectral hand reached for him, Salamander asked why. He simply replied, "Because I am Luke." His expression hardened, shadows falling across his face as he clutched the emblem on his chest. "Because I have to become Luke," he stated with dark finality. He continued walking away, his back turned. "Therefore," he pleaded, "don't tell anyone my true nature." The request hung in the air, followed by a profound silence. He stood alone in the forest, leaning against a tree in quiet contemplation. He offers a quiet "thank you" over his shoulder, a fleeting, gentle smile on his lips. His expression then firms as he tells the spirit that its understanding is all that matters. As he walks deeper into the woods, the spirit's voice calls out, asking where he is going. He ignores the question, his mind already set on his next move. The entrance exam is a month away, giving him time for a detour. He draws a great sword, its polished surface gleaming. A sharp, determined grin spreads across his face as he reflects on his long-held goal of becoming Luke. He dismisses the idea that he merely wants to imitate the original. The answer, he knows, is a resounding no. Pushing through the dense undergrowth, he acknowledges his own shortcomings. He sees himself as negative, lacking a core motivation or the will to act. For someone like him to become the hero Luke, he must gain knowledge, increase his abilities, and become stronger than the man he seeks to emulate. To achieve this, he believes he must place himself in a harsh environment, the kind that forces growth. He scans the area, certain it was around here somewhere. Then his eyes lock onto his destination. Found it. Before him gapes the dark maw of a cave. A deeply ominous presence emanates from within, but he stands firm. To ensure there are never again victims like Aisha, he resolves to endure any hell necessary. Luke stands at the mouth of a vast cavern, peering into a sun-dappled forest that lies within. He explains to his companion, the salamander, that to level up quickly, they must defeat a powerful monster. He notes the presence of many strong creatures, the same kind that killed Aisha, and declares that they are his target. Acknowledging the danger, he commands the salamander to light their way, and the spirit responds, glowing brightly as a floating orb. He steps confidently into the cavern, assuring his companion that he knows the way. He explains that he memorized the map from the game he used to play, so navigating won't be an issue. Their initial target, he states, is a small, weak monster, but even so, he senses a palpable threat as he proceeds deeper, ready for their first encounter. As he moves forward, he suddenly halts. He senses a monster's presence just ahead and briefly considers engaging it. He quickly dismisses the idea, judging the narrow passage to be a poor place for a fight. Instead, he begins to climb a nearby ledge, reasoning that a detour would be wiser. He explains that this alternate path leads to a wide, open space, a much more advantageous location. While he ascends, the salamander's voice echoes in his mind, questioning how he possesses such knowledge of a place he's never visited. Luke pauses, his expression hardening, and admits that it is because he has knowledge of the original work. His mind flashes with images of open books and scenes from the story he knows. This original knowledge is his ultimate weapon, a perfect guide. But he understands it's useless if the salamander doesn't trust him, and resolves to keep using this foreknowledge to prevent another tragedy. He turns back, his resolve clear. He declares that he lied, claiming instead to have awakened an ability to foresee the future. He acknowledges that it's an unbelievable claim. He strikes a confident pose, asking with a flourish if his supposed new power isn't amazing. The orb of light floats closer, the spirit's voice questioning his claim. It asks if he is a man of his word, wondering how many times it should believe him. Luke simply offers a knowing smile. His smile fades slightly as he clarifies that this power of his is not so convenient as it might seem. He stands as if on a stage, illuminated by a single beam of light. The salamander's voice echoes, stating that this lie must be the correct one. If Luke were to be possessed, the spirit muses, then it and everyone else would have no choice but to lend him their strength. His expression hardens with resolve. He knows he cannot simply rely on deception. No matter what future he foresees, the burden of the fight falls squarely on his own shoulders. As he walks deeper into the cavern, the salamander questions him about his capabilities, asking how many times he can use his blaze edge skill. He calculates that at full power, he could manage it twice. However, by adjusting the power output, he could likely use it up to 5 times. The spirit expresses surprise, questioning the very idea of adjusting a skill's power. This simple question reveals a critical difference. He reflects that in the game, there was no command to adjust the power consumption of skills. This world, he realizes, possesses a greater depth, but also greater risk. A miscalculation here could be fatal. Surveying the area, he senses a strong demonic presence, confirming that this place is perfect for his objective. His plan hinges on a core mechanic of this reality. When a monster is defeated, its body releases a torrent of magic from its source. Anyone nearby can absorb this outflowing magic to increase their own power. The principle is simple. The stronger the foe, the more efficient the game. He focuses on this fact with grim determination. To master the spirit arts, he must increase his base magic power. Success would unlock abilities he previously couldn't even attempt. He continues his trek through the winding stone passages, the thought of wielding new magic echoing in his mind. The spirit, hovering near his shoulder, questions him. Magic? But your original self couldn't use it, could he? Luke affirms this, explaining that the Luke from the original story never learned the spirit arts. This is a new path he intends to forge. He cautions the spirit, however, that his foreknowledge has limits. Things that were impossible in the original story remain so for him now. He stops in a vast, open chamber and sets down his pack. He explains that while the game version of himself had hidden talents, learning magic independently was a significant challenge. Therefore, he must experiment. As he speaks, he senses the growing demonic aura. The enemy is coming. Now, all he has to do is wait for the hunt to begin. He draws his sword, its blade gleaming in the dim light. His expression is one of intense concentration as he prepares for the coming battle. Here, he will raise his magic power as much as he can, striving to catch up to the hero he once knew only as a character. He stares up in disbelief, a bead of sweat tracing its way down his temple. Looming over him is a monstrous, insectoid leg, its dark carapace gleaming. The creature reveals its full form, a towering, skeletal praying mantis. He recognizes it instantly, a death mantis. His eyes widen in terror. This was no mid-level beast. It was far stronger than the creature he had intended to hunt. He realized it was an impossible fight and knew he had to fall back. But his body refused to obey. His legs trembled uncontrollably, frozen to the spot by sheer terror. As the monster's massive, scythe-like arm slices through the air towards him, a dreadful realization dawns on him. This was the difference between himself and the Luke he knew from the story. His own heart was weak. A voice, perhaps a memory of the original Luke, echoes in his mind, urging him not to flee. The thought shatters his paralysis. He instinctively raises his sword, bracing himself to meet the descending limb. The impact is tremendous. Steel grinds against chitin with a deafening crash, the force of the blow reverberating through his entire body. The sheer power of the strike sends him sprawling to the ground. He looks up to see the death mantis towering over him, poised for another attack. Yet, the monster hesitates, its attack stalled. He looks on, bewildered, realizing that his body had moved on its own, a pure, instinctual reaction. He remained on the ground, gasping for breath. He knew the talent of the sword was supposed to be functioning within him, yet his hands trembled so violently he could barely keep his grip. A wave of pure terror washed over him, his body refusing to obey. His body and mind were in complete opposition, refusing to cooperate. As he knelt, paralyzed, the salamander's voice cut through his panic, calling his name. The spirit asked what was wrong, advising him to retreat for now if the situation was too difficult. But all Luke could think was that he wanted to escape. But that thought was immediately crushed by a new resolve. He couldn't return to the person he once was. The salamander, sensing the shift, told him not to overdo it, but Luke shouted back in desperation. He insisted it was impossible, reminding the spirit of what it had just witnessed, his body moving on its own. He looked back at the towering death mantis, its skeletal face looming over him. He screamed that in his current state, he was far too outmatched to fight. It was impossible. He couldn't become the hero Luke was meant to be, and he certainly couldn't defeat a monster like this. A week has passed. Amidst a swarm of chittering insectoid monsters, the great fire spirit, Salamander, materializes to warn Luke that 4 death mantises have multiplied. With his sword drawn, Luke grits his teeth and confirms he understands, bracing for the assault. One of the colossal beasts lunges, its massive, scythe-like limb crashing down and shattering the earth where Luke had been standing just a moment before. He dodges, and Salamander's voice echoes with instruction. Rage, go wild, and let the flames tear through evil, becoming a blade. In response, Luke channels his power, shouting the name of the technique, Raise Edge, as his sword ignites. The fiery blade arcs through the air, slicing cleanly through the torso of the nearest death mantis. He barely has a moment to register his success before another mantis's scythe whips past his face, missing him by a hair's breadth. Without breaking his momentum, he spins and carves through the remaining monsters, his flaming sword a blur of motion as he calls upon Raise Edge again and again. The final creature falls, its head tumbling to the ground. Luke stands over the carnage, a fresh cut on his cheek, his sword still held at the ready. He surveys the field, littered with the dismembered bodies of the 4 mantises, and wonders aloud if that was all of them. Taking a moment to reflect, Luke realizes that even using his full power, he still has much to improve. He notes his progress. Where he could once only use Raise Edge a single time, he can now activate it at will. His magical power has grown 5-fold, a direct result of surviving these constant life or death struggles. A determined smile touches his lips, but the smile vanishes. A guttural roar echoes in his mind as he suddenly doubles over, trembling. The terror of the past week, of nearly dying over and over, rushes back in a horrifying, traumatic flashback, overwhelming him completely. He was tormented by a vision of the past, sweat beading on his brow. The smiling face of Aisha appeared before him, her memory a sharp reminder of what was at stake. Her sacrifice was for his sake, a warmth that saved him, and he could not afford to be careless and let it be in vain. The haunting vision faded, leaving him gasping for breath on his knees. The small, fiery form of Salamander floated nearby, asking if he was all right and suggesting he rest. Luke pushed himself up, refusing. He insisted he couldn't rest yet, not while he was still weak, admitting that it was only after a battle that he truly felt alive. He shook his head frantically, the thought of such a memory overwhelming him in the middle of a real fight, a terrifying prospect. It was an experience he never wanted to have again. The fiery spirit observed that he was getting carried away. Salamander noted that after only 10 days, he was already strong enough that he likely wouldn't lose to his peers. Luke retorted fiercely, shouting that his enemies were not limited to those of his own generation. His outburst faded as he stood under the dim light in the barren wasteland. He conceded that perhaps he had adopted a poor attitude, especially since Salamander was only showing concern for him. The spirit floated closer, its form wavering slightly. It then posed a direct question to him. Luke, how strong do you want to become? A confident smirk spread across his face as he gave his answer without a moment's hesitation. The strongest in the world. The spirit seemed taken aback, remarking that his ambition was greater than it had imagined. Luke clarified that it wasn't about ambition. He explained that with such a destiny, many people could be saved. His gaze hardened with conviction. He now understood that aiming to be the strongest in the world was not a desire, but his solemn duty. He turned back to the spirit, his voice steady. He declared that he must become the world's strongest hero. With this resolve, he made a request, stating he would be happy if Salamander would continue to help him. Salamander's fiery form roars in response. The Great Spirit declares that if Luke is serious, his goal has merit. After all, Salamander is one of the 4 great spirits, and such ambition is fitting for its partner. He smiles, a newfound confidence on his face as the spirit's flames flicker beside him. His resolve, however, is quickly interrupted by a rumbling in his stomach. He realizes it's time to find some provisions. He peers into a small, lit cavern, contemplating his options. Salamander's voice chides him, asking if he plans to eat weeds again. The spirit offers to roast them, but questions his palate. Luke concedes with a sigh that the spirit has a point. His thoughts are shattered by a sudden, piercing scream echoing through the cavern. He hadn't imagined anyone else would be in this dungeon. As a small rock clatters nearby, Salamander remarks on a pathetic sound, but Luke is already turning toward the source of the cry. Deeper within the passage, the source of the scream becomes clear. A massive death mantis looms over a fallen figure. A faint light emanates from a nearby orb. He rushes forward without hesitation. Salamander's voice rings out, warning him that his magic is nearly depleted and that he must not be reckless. But the warning does little to deter him. He knows that even if his magic is gone, he cannot simply abandon someone in need. With his resolve firm, he draws his sword. Salamander announces a new technique, and Luke bellows its name, Noble Flame. This is the second skill Luke has learned, a long-range attack that combines a powerful thrust with a release of energy. He prepares to unleash the blow, a gale of power ready to pierce the sky. He unleashes his attack, roaring its name, Blaze Strike. A torrent of fiery energy, shaped like massive claws, erupts from his position and hurtles toward the death mantis. The fiery claws slam into the monstrous insect, engulfing it completely. On the ground below, the young woman the creature had targeted is thrown back by the force of the impact. As the attack subsides, the massive death mantis collapses to the ground, defeated. The woman looks up in astonishment at her savior, Luke, who stands in the distance as a glowing orb floats up from the monster's remains. He pants, sweat dripping from his face, a wave of relief washing over him as he realizes he made it in time. The exertion hits him a moment later, and he clutches his arm, exhausted. His relief gives way to self-criticism. This isn't right, he thinks. The real Luke wouldn't look so anxious. He should project an aura of confidence and dignity. Steeling himself, he puts on a confident smile and approaches the woman he rescued, asking if she is all right. She looks up at him, her expression bright with relief and gratitude. She confirms that she is fine and thanks him warmly. As Luke stands over the desolate landscape, the woman's voice echoes her thanks, stating plainly that he saved her. Her tone suddenly shifts from gratitude to confusion. She looks at him, her brow furrowed, and asks, why? The woman clarifies her question, asking why someone like him is in a place like this. She reveals a shocking piece of information. She wasn't supposed to meet him for another 5 years. Luke is stunned, wondering how she could possibly know that. He realizes this unexpected turn of events might be an opportunity. He watched as the woman he'd just saved patted the dust from her clothes. Though he couldn't grasp the full situation, he recognized this as an incredible stroke of luck. This was her, the heroine he was supposed to meet. Turning to him with a bright, confident smile, she introduced herself. Her name was Anita Lucas, and she was an adventurer. A young woman with a bright smile introduces herself as Anita. Across from her, a young man with a friendly grin grasps her hand, stating his name is Luke Ventima. As they stand face to face after their handshake, she looks up at him, a hint of confusion on her features. His friendly demeanor vanishes, replaced by a stern gaze. He dismisses her as a mere child, openly doubting her ability to keep up with him. Taken aback, she throws her hands up defensively, apologizing profusely. She explains that she had no ill intent. This is a dangerous place, and she was simply stunned by the immense power of his earlier magic, which she hadn't expected from someone who looked so young. He retorts that, from his perspective, she also appears to be a child. A flash of irritation crosses her face as she clenches her fist, emphatically declaring that she is 18 years old and a complete adult. He concedes her point, acknowledging that 18 is the age of adulthood in this world. However, he muses that becoming an adult doesn't guarantee maturity, and that her appearance remains quite childlike. He struggles to hide his amusement, covering his mouth. His amusement proves too much for her. She grabs him by the collar, demanding to know why he is laughing. It is known that this woman, Anita Lucas, is counted among the truly powerful. The two had met after Luke graduated from the academy and began his journey as an adventurer. Anita's mastery of water attribute magic is absolute. Those who witness her true capabilities cannot deny her immense power. Indeed, she is known throughout the world as an S-rank adventurer. She points an accusatory finger at him, reminding him that she saw the S-rank adventurer certificate on his chest just moments before. She insists that he should show more respect to his elders. He looks away, a faint blush on his cheeks, admitting that he finds honorifics difficult and prefers a more casual way of speaking. Her surprise gives way to a resigned sigh. She decides to let it slide, considering he is her benefactor. She looks him over, noticing that he's injured in several places. She tells him she needs to examine his wounds. Without waiting for a reply, she raises a hand and casts a spell. A brilliant light emanates from her palm as she incants the word, Cure. He stares in amazement as his arm sparkles with healing energy. He recognizes the incantation as water attribute recovery magic, a spell meant for treating minor injuries. As the light fades, she asks if it still hurts. He confirms that he's been healed, then remarks that he's asked this of her before. He silently resolves not to miss this opportunity, just as he hadn't 5 years prior. Confused, she questions what he means. He looks at her with determination and makes his request clear. He wants her to teach him magic, specifically the water attribute recovery spell she just used. She considers his words, explaining that as a locally famous magic user, she is quite accustomed to such requests. She then points out that he must know a simple cure spell shouldn't be powerful enough to heal a wound in an instant. She continues, stating that in situations like this, there is always something she must ask first. Turning to face him, she asks why he wants to learn magic. She mentions the entrance exam for the Six Salt Magic Academy is in a year, an institution she attended, and asks what he intends to study there. He is surprised she knows of his plans. He answers with conviction, declaring that he wants his name to be known. He wants to become a hero. When she repeats the word in surprise, he clarifies, a hero like the one who ended the Great World War against the Demon King Sigurd. He gestures boldly, proclaiming that one day his name will be known throughout the world, and that entering the academy is the first step toward that goal. He stands before Anita, who questions his ambition. She points out that 10 years have passed since the Demon King Sigurd's world war ended. In this time of peace, she asks, what need is there for a hero? Luke simply replies that there is. He elaborates with a confident look, reminding her that she had just saved him. Turning with arms outstretched, he declares that the era is irrelevant. Somewhere, someone is always asking for help, and he wants to be the one who can always save them. This, he explains, is his ideal of a hero. He acknowledges that it might sound childish, but he believes that when a person genuinely strives for such a goal, they can exhibit immense strength. Anita stares at him, taken aback by his conviction. She finds his words strangely persuasive, though she can't quite understand why. It is a unique quality of his. Words spoken from his heart, reflected in his expression, always reach their intended audience. After a moment of contemplation, she claps her hands together decisively. With a bright smile, she agrees to be his teacher. Surprised, he asks if she is certain, and she confirms. She winks playfully, explaining that as long as she is satisfied, she won't mind. However, she warns that depending on the situation, she might have to teach him some wicked methods. He agrees, acknowledging that while he isn't a bad person, he understands the necessity. His expression turns serious as he reflects internally. There is another, truer reason he wants to become a hero, but that truth is now deeply entangled with his own personal circumstances. The thought brings forth a vision of Aisha. A substitute for her is required. Because he allowed his childhood friend, Aisha, to die, she has now become an indispensable healer for the battles to come. It is a precious role that only a user of recovery magic can fill. Luke continues his explanation to a skeptical Anita. He states that besides Aisha, there are only a few others at the academy who can use healing magic, and none of them would be able to keep up with him. He recalls the stark reality he faced. A great battle would likely occur during the academy's entrance exam. At that point, without a way to fill the void left by Aisha, he would be in trouble. He realized that if she died, he would have no choice but to take on the role of healer himself. Returning to the present, he tells Anita that he had planned to purchase healing items in the capital, but meeting her was a stroke of luck that he believes will resolve his concerns. She looks at him, surprised, and asks if it's truly all right, considering she is a water attribute user. He smiles warmly, reminding her that she used fire magic to help him earlier. Since she can use fire, he reasons she can likely be taught other things as well. He then makes a kind proposal. What he truly wants to learn isn't magic, but spirit arts. Anita's expression softens into a gentle smile. Her pleasant demeanor shatters in an instant. Her eyes widen in shock as she shouts, "Spirit arts?" Grabbing him, she frantically tells him away. She leans in close, her voice filled with disbelief. She questions how he could possibly learn them at his age, before even entering the Magic Academy, when only a handful of state mages can use them at all. She pulls back with a pout, explaining that spirit arts, which borrow power from spirits, are far more effective than magic. Contracting with a state spirit is rare. And in this world, humans who can form a pact with a great spirit are revered as exceptionally strong. He calmly points out that she has a contract with Salamander, one of the 4 great spirits, and promises to keep it a secret. Flustered, Anita bows deeply, apologizing for getting carried away and admitting that he is clearly the greater genius. He reassures her, stating that in a real fight, she is likely much stronger than him. However, he adds with a confident smirk, at this current moment, he is actually the stronger of the two. Anita looks on, slightly irritated. Anita's power is not limited to her water attribute. She can also wield fire magic. The combination of these 2 legendary attributes results in an extremely powerful magic only she can use, known as the Spirit of Legend. Her true strength, however, is a secret ultimate art called Masquerade, a spell that mesmerizes an opponent, allowing for a swift and deadly assassination. She is, in every sense of the word, a heroine who has surpassed all expectations. She looked at him, a playful smile on her face, and asked if he was aiming for the top seat. Luke grinned back, confirming that was his intention and that he planned to train accordingly. His thoughts drifted to the academy, where a certain heroine resided. He acknowledged her immense strength, knowing she had a contract with Salamander of the 4 great spirits, a power great enough to overwhelm him. Anita, however, seemed to dismiss the challenge, remarking that with such strength, using spirit arts to enter the academy would be a simple matter. He recalled that in the original course of events, he couldn't even aim for the top seat during the entrance exam. But now, as he watched the heroine from afar, a new thought took root. Perhaps, as he was now, he could actually win against her. A shadow fell across his face, his expression hardening with resolve. Returning to the present, Anita cheerfully offered to show him some magic immediately. Luke agreed, noting that he had a talent for it, but his focus was elsewhere. Anita suggested they begin with a tribute endowment training. Nearby, the heroine turned slightly and gave her assent. While Anita watches from a short distance, Luke practices his magic. She asks if his concentration was broken, but he turns to her with a wide grin. He explains that while practicing magic seems difficult at first, there's a knack to it. With a flourish, he reveals a small, shimmering orb of energy floating steadily above his palm, proudly declaring that he did it. His pride is met with a stunned silence, followed by an outburst from Anita. She leaps to her feet, exclaiming that he's a genius. Internally, a storm of jealousy rages within her. Oblivious to her turmoil, Luke simply asks what it feels like from her perspective. Attempting to regain her composure, She suggests he try making one with both hands. Before she can finish her thought about how embarrassing this is, Luke holds up two perfectly formed orbs, one in each hand, and asks if this is what she meant. He asks if he's doing it right. Anita lets out a long sigh, admitting to herself that while she had anticipated it, the reality of Luke's aptitude for magic is still shocking. She points a finger at him, her expression turning serious. She tells him that he is getting the order of things completely wrong. She explains that for a magic user, a contract with a spirit isn't the final goal. In fact, it's the opposite. Spirit arts are what one masters after perfecting magic. But somehow, Luke has managed to learn spirit arts first. As she speaks, a complex, swirling orb of sparkling energy forms in her palm. She wonders aloud if he can imitate this act of kneading and circulating magical power, admitting that she herself doesn't fully understand what she is doing. She presents the shimmering orb to him. So, she begins, "Why don't you try asking your spirit?" Luke stares, confused by her suggestion, repeating the word, spirit. He looks intently at the swirling energy, wondering if he can replicate what Salamander did. He focuses, thinking that the sensation was probably something like this. As he concentrates, Anita explains the truth of his ability. She tells him that he is constantly having his spirit perform advanced magical control on his behalf. Spirits, she elaborates, are naturally skilled at handling magical power, and a contracted human can learn to replicate that sensation. She watched with a faint smile as a sphere of crackling energy solidified in Luke's hand. He stared at it, astonished that he had truly managed it on his own. She then asked if this was a display of his own innate talent. He grinned, praising Anita for being a good teacher. Flustered, she brushed off the compliment, admitting it was the first time she'd been praised that way. He then added that, by the way, he had something he wanted to ask her for his own studies later. Her demeanor shifted instantly. Leaning in close, her expression turning serious, she asked him a direct question. How exactly did he form a contract with a spirit? He paused, touching a finger to his chin in thought. He confessed that he didn't really know. The spirit was just there by his side when he came to his senses. She stared dumbfounded. Anita explained that such a thing was an extremely rare case, as a contract could only be formed if a spirit took a particular liking to someone. Overwhelmed, she collapsed to her knees, declaring that his situation was far too unusual to be of any use as a reference. He then asked if the reverse was true, if there were cases where an exceptionally skilled magic user could easily contract a spirit. She confirmed that was correct, but pointed out that his situation was the complete opposite, as he was a novice. She continued, explaining with a cheerful expression that she herself could only make simple requests of lesser spirits. Luke looked at her, confused by her statement, wondering why she couldn't just converse with them. She elaborated that spirits are broadly divided into three types. First are the lesser spirits, which possess only a simple consciousness. Next are the independent spirits, which can lend their power to humans through contracts. And finally, they're the exceptionally powerful four great spirits. To demonstrate, she spread her arms wide, surrounded by glowing motes of light. With a bright, open expression, she called out, asking for her request to be properly delivered. Watching her, Luke came to a realization. He had always assumed that magic users employed lesser spirits, but now he understood. Anita was that very type of magic user. He nodded silently, processing this new information. He was still processing the nature of her magic when Anita proposed a practical test. She suggested he try using water attribute magic, specifically a spell called Aqua Shoot. Taken aback, he asked if she expected him to fight a monster. She playfully clarified that he should try shooting at her instead. Winking, Anita reassured him it would be fine, declaring it an opportunity to show him her true power. She urged him to use his full strength, though he still looked uncertain. He decided there was no reason to hesitate. Accepting her challenge, he began to concentrate, gathering magical energy between his palms to form a shimmering sphere of water. His first attempt fizzled, the water splashing harmlessly. He quickly realized he needed to knead the magic and increase its density. Focusing again, he successfully formed a much more stable and potent-looking orb. With a determined shout, he launched the Aqua Shoot. As the projectile hurtled towards her, Anita calmly watched its approach and invoked her own spell. Aqua Shield. The blast of water slammed into its target with immense force. He stared at the result, his eyes wide with shock as a bead of sweat traced a path down his temple. His powerful attack was rendered useless, parting harmlessly around a swirling vortex of water that Anita had conjured for her defense. Watching the magical energies dissipate, he realized with a start that he might have put far too much power into the spell. He rushed to her side, asking if she was all right. Soaked and sputtering, Anita admitted it had been a close call. He apologized, stunned by the spell's force, but she explained that since it was only an intermediate-level spell, she was able to control it, though it had scared her a little. She concluded that if he could master control, he would learn basic magic very quickly. He remained silent for a moment, then asked Anita how she, being so powerful, could have been brought so low by a mere monster. She gave his head a light, reassuring pat, glad that he was all right, before explaining that she had been poisoned. She continued, recounting that she had entered the cave on a guild request. The scent of a monster had been reported, but it was supposed to be a weak one. Though she managed to retreat, she had not escaped unharmed. Showing him a dark mark on her leg, she explained that it was a potent poison and that the antidote was working differently than expected. That was why she had been resting there, trying to recover. She admitted that meeting him had been a stroke of good fortune. He questioned if she even had a plan, but she just smiled. She declared that now that she understood his condition, she would teach him recovery magic. He laughed, remarking that she was quick to call him a genius again. Later, they made camp inside the cave. A small fire crackled between their two sleeping bags, casting a faint light on the rocky walls as they rested. Both of them slept soundly, recovering from their respective ordeals. In the quiet of the night, however, Luke awoke. He silently slipped out of his sleeping bag, taking his sword with him. He stood before a narrow passage, contemplating Anita's words about it being a safe zone. He questioned if that was truly the case, reasoning that large monsters like the Death Mantis or Titan Golems couldn't possibly fit through such a small entrance. Beads of sweat formed on his brow. He felt the strain of constantly trying to act as Luke, an exhausting effort that contorted his face with frustration. Suddenly, a small, white, orb-like creature with a single eye floated before him. A voice emanated from it, speaking a single word, salamander. Luke looked up in surprise, wondering what it could be. He covers his face, flustered, as the small spirit speaks. It asks if he could feel its presence, noting that for a man so full of confidence, he was putting on a strong, cool, and passionate act. The spirit continues, observing that at least when it was in its true, larger form, he didn't seem to notice its real nature. He looks up, telling the spirit that it's fine and there's no need to worry about such things. The spirit, however, firmly insists that there is. This insistence triggers a painful memory of Aisha, bloodied and injured. He recalls her telling him that her words from her childhood were what allowed her to become aware of her own sin, and that this was the most important thing to her, her very reason for being. The weight of the memory forces him to his knees. He thinks about how he, the one meant to wield the holy sword, is being toyed with by a demon girl. He feels he is not the brave man others see, but someone clinging to a faint hope. With his head throbbing, he resolves to undergo training. Pushing himself up, he dismisses the idea that he's overworking himself, stating that he has been recovering for this very purpose. A bright light forms between his hands as he casts Vital Heal, a spell he remembers from a reference book, meant to restore one's physical condition from exhaustion. After casting the spell, he sits on a rock to rest. Salamander remarks that it dislikes the water attribute, as it's the opposite of its own. Luke smiles faintly, replying that it's not quite like that. He explains that since they're magical life forms, he had assumed their opposing attributes would lead to clashing personalities, but he now sees that isn't true. His thoughts then shift back to his training, deciding to practice Cure. Next, a spell for healing wounds. To create an injury to practice on, he draws his sword and deliberately makes a shallow cut on his own leg. The small spirit lets out a cry of alarm. He holds up a hand to calm the frantic spirit, explaining that he can't practice healing magic without a wound to mend. He assures Salamander that it's all right, as he can heal himself immediately. He held his hand over the gash on his leg, a soft, warm light beginning to glow from his palm as he invoked the healing magic. He uttered the incantation, Cure. The magic took hold, but he immediately noted that unlike Anita, he couldn't heal such a wound in a single moment. As the light pulsed and the flesh on his leg slowly mended, he analyzed the spell's efficiency. The magic consumption for Cure was only 1/10 of what Blaze Edge required, meaning he could likely practice it 150 times. He calculated that if he rested for a bit, his magic would recover by morning, but a full recovery from the wound would take about a minute. Without hesitation, he sliced his leg open once more. The great fire spirit's voice echoed with concern, expressing a fear that its master was losing something fundamental to his humanity. He turned, a serene smile on his face as his hand began to glow again. It couldn't be helped, he explained, because before he was a person, he had to be Luke. His resolve was absolute, his eyes burning with a fierce determination that overshadowed any pain. Anita Lucas reflects on the boy she has just met. To her, Luke was the first person of his kind she had ever encountered. Her thoughts drift back to the moment he defeated the Death Mantis with a single, overwhelming display of power. She had considered that teaming up with a veteran adventurer was the recommended course of action, and that a B-rank demon like Luke was not some child she could simply take under her wing. She was skeptical when he claimed to have a contract with a high-ranking spirit, and even felt a pang of jealousy at the thought of him being a legitimate mage. Yet, despite all this, he was the one who had surprised her the most. His declaration had been utterly resolute. With unwavering conviction, he stated his goal. He wanted to become a hero. She had initially thought it a childish dream, but found herself unable to laugh. The words from his mouth shone like a polished gem, radiating a heat and determination that seemed to envelop her completely. Looking at him, she felt a profound certainty. This was merely the prologue to a legend. She was sure that this boy would one day become a hero. A sly smile crossed her face. The idea wasn't so bad after all. If Luke became a hero, then she, the one who taught him magic, would be known as the hero's master. What started as a whim was now a serious consideration. Later, during a training session, Luke approached her. He asked Anita to teach him intermediate-level recovery magic. She balked at the request, reminding him that she had only just taught him the beginner-level spell yesterday, and that he needed to master it completely first. In response, he simply held up his hand. A brilliant, sparkling light emanated from his palm as he cast the spell perfectly. "How's this?" he asked. Anita stared, utterly speechless. She analyzed the flow of his magic, recalling how rough and inefficient it had been only the day before. Now, there was no flaw. His beginner-level recovery magic was already perfected. She listens as Luke declares his intention to master the magic he's learned. Seeing his resolve, she agrees, suggesting that perhaps she could teach him intermediate-level spells as well. The thought sends a jolt through her. She can't help but blush, realizing with a burst of internal excitement that he is, without a doubt, a true genius. She sits alone, contemplating the sheer improbability of it all. He had spent his days and nights tirelessly treating patients at the clinic, yet somehow, in a single evening, he had mastered a spell she assumed he'd been secretly practicing. It was an astounding success. Her expression turns serious as she concedes that she may have underestimated him. She had initially believed his aptitude was simply due to a high affinity and a contract with a powerful spirit, but now she understood she had been mistaken. Luke interrupts her thoughts, stating that separate from his connection to spirits, he possesses an overwhelming talent of his own. He asks her about the application of the Quirce spell, theorizing that by increasing its density, he could also increase its healing speed. He concludes that this proves he has what it takes to become a hero. He is correct. Anita confirms his theory, explaining that when solidifying magic, the outcome is determined by the range. She instructs him to try creating a hard outer shell around the magical energy. He focuses his concentration, and a sphere of light forms in his palm. As he shapes it, Anita watches with a pleasant smile, though inwardly she is reeling, stunned by how quickly he is mastering the concept. The perfect result makes her grind her teeth in frustration. Luke observes that the sphere is flawless and notes that he's been hearing that grinding sound from her for some time. Flustered, she blurts out that her heart is being thoroughly defeated by jealousy. Luke simply smiles and asks if she has come to a decision. She grits her teeth, her expression hardening with resolve. Meanwhile, Luke effortlessly manipulates the light magic, shaping it into a small, cat-like form that playfully twitches its ears. She mused on her own status as the highest-ranked adventurer, an S rank, and how meeting Luke felt like a divine message. It was as if the gods had given her a handicap, preventing her from growing any further. She lamented this fact, speaking her own name, Anita, with a sigh. Her thoughts were interrupted by Luke, who pointed towards her and asked about the way she was channeling her magic. With a weary sigh, she dismissed his question. Turning away from him, she snapped that he shouldn't ask her anything. Internally, she fumed, believing this was just another cruel twist of fate from the gods. This had become their routine. During the day, Anita would diligently teach Luke recovery magic. But once night fell, they would slip away to train together in secret. During one such session, a sudden flash of light revealed an ambush. A massive Titan golem and 2 death mantises appear before them. Without hesitation, Luke prepared a spell, chanting Aqua Shoot. He then unleashed a different attack, pouring a little extra magic into it and shouting its name, Blaze Edge. A searing wave of fire erupted from his hand, rushing towards the golem. The fiery blade cleaved cleanly through the Titan golem's torso, its momentum carrying it forward to strike one of the death mantises standing directly behind it. Determined to end it quickly, he declared his intent to finish them all at once, unleashing another blaze edge that tore across the battlefield. In an instant, the battle was over. Luke stood alone amidst the smoking, shattered remains of the monsters, calmly stating that it was finished. He then noticed a small injury on his right arm. Remarking that it was just a scratch, he placed his hand over it and cast Cure. A soft light enveloped the wound, which vanished completely. He walks away from the site of his recent battle, turning back with a confident smile. He declares that he barely got a scratch and that it was an easy victory. He reflects on his rapid progress, clenching a fist. After 10 days and nights of relentless training, he can now instantly heal injuries as severe as broken bones. He has grown accustomed to using magic, a result of his daily practice. As he continues on his way, he admits to himself that practicing magic, particularly earth magic, is surprisingly enjoyable. However, a darker thought surfaces to embody the role of Luke. He had resolved to sacrifice everything, and feels he should suppress such feelings of enjoyment. This reminds him of his childhood, when he loved drawing classes. The joy of bringing an imagined design to life was always special to him, and he recalls the fun he had when he could multitask. His reverie is broken by Anita, who confronts him with a flustered expression. She demands to know how he is capable of multicasting the Cure spell, explaining that while its range is limited, it's faster and more mana-efficient than intermediate-level healing magic. He simply smiles and gives credit to the salamander, thanking the spirit for teaching him such fine control over his magical power. A small, glowing orb of light, the salamander's current form, hovers nearby. The spirit's voice emanates from it, denying the credit. It insists that the talent was Luke's from the very beginning. The spirit elaborates, explaining that while it controlled most of the magic Luke used immediately after their contract, spirit magic is heavily dependent on the contractor's innate sense. It reveals that Luke possessed a significant natural talent for handling magic from the very beginning, leaving him looking surprised. He lowers his gaze, his expression turning grim. He thinks to himself that it makes sense. The ability to grow stronger while finding enjoyment in the process is not a talent he should possess. He concludes that Luke was truly born to be a hero. The thought triggers a painful memory, a young Aisha lying motionless on the ground. He blames himself for losing his precious childhood friend. Standing alone in the present, he apologizes, then clenches his fist in anguish, cursing the name Luke. He charges forward, sword held ready, a look of fierce determination on his face. He shouts that these new foes are even stronger than the last, but that's exactly what he needs. Anything less would be a problem. His charge culminates in a leap, plunging him down towards a writhing mass of shadowy beasts. He makes a silent, solemn vow to never again grow conceited, to never let his guard down, and to constantly hone his skills. He will do this so that he never has to witness someone else's life be lost again. A young woman bursts in with a look of sheer panic, her hands clenched into fists. She shouts for Luke, declaring that they have a huge problem. He looks up, startled, and asks what's wrong. After a brief pause, he calmly announces that their food supply has run out. He continues, saying that while he appreciates her concern, he had already told her he would handle procuring more supplies himself. She immediately refuses, her eyes narrowing as she reminds him of her position as his master. With a slight smile, he teases that if she doesn't feed him, he'll have to resort to eating grass. Annoyed, she retorts that grass is just grass, and she doesn't eat wild plants. He then offers to go and investigate the situation himself. He explains that he has some business in a nearby village anyway, and will buy food while he's there, offering her a few coins. She accepts the money, calling it a bad habit of his, but quickly adds that she has her own funds. Luke smiles, remarking that she is truly an S-rank adventurer. Later, in what appears to be a cavern, he turns to her with a look of dawning realization, asking if he really said something like that to her. Sweat beads on his face as panic sets in. He realizes he's made a mistake, revealing knowledge from his past. He desperately tries to calm himself, reasoning that if she just looks, she'll understand her own strength. Her response is not one of suspicion, but a wide, joyful smile. She giggles, seemingly delighted by his slip of the tongue, as if she understands completely. Still flustered, Luke asks how much food he should buy, suggesting 10 days' worth. She thoughtfully considers it, then tells him 3 days' worth will be fine, as she wants him to do as he pleases. He sighs in relief, thinking to himself that she really does have the aura of an S rank. He questions if 3 days is truly enough. She confirms with a confident smile, explaining that the poison she's suffering from should be cured by then. It took time to analyze its components, but once she's healed, she intends to immediately tackle their next request. Luke considered his situation. Having accepted a guild request, he was obligated to complete it swiftly, yet he couldn't simply abandon his training with Anita. He paused his sweeping, watching Anita walk away. He mused that he had many things he wanted to do for her, but time was short. In 1 month, he and Anita, would have to leave the village for the academy entrance exams. The journey to the capital was long, leaving him only this month to deal with the second major event he knew was coming. With this urgency, he raced towards the capital road alone. He recalled from his past life that the second event involved an attack by houndwolves. He had searched for them before, but never found them. Just then, 2 of the beasts appeared. He knew that while Aisha's magic was powerful, he could handle these himself without injury. However, the true nature of the second event was revealed elsewhere. A masterless wagon, its horse being viciously attacked by 2 hulking, bear-like monsters. At this rate, they would not make it in time. Seeing the real threat, Luke acted instantly. He called upon Salamander for body reinforcement, shouting the name of the art. Raise Alma. He understood now that this was no mere buff, but a fire spirit art that dramatically enhanced his physical abilities, commanding the great fire to dwell within him. He shot forward like an arrow. His speed amplified. He closed the distance in a blur. He had realized during practice that this enhancement was best used to quickly eliminate key targets within a group. He brought his sword around, channeling power into the blade and crying out, "Raise edge!" After dispatching the monsters, he stood alone in the clearing. From now on, he decided his entire combat strategy would be built around Raise Alma. He then turned his attention to the rescued white horse. Normally, he would have needed to procure a horse, making this a fortunate encounter. It was the first time he'd had a means of travel other than a carriage. He approached the animal, thinking that with Raise Alma, he didn't strictly need a horse for speed. He wondered what to do with this wild creature. To his astonishment, the horse communicated with him. It stated that while it had no intention of asking for help, it wouldn't mind being indebted to one who had sent a spirit to it. Luke realized the horse could speak, recalling that spirits and natural animals shared a unique bond. The horse then trotted off calmly, seemingly content to follow. His journey continued, leading him to an inn. This marked the beginning of the third event, the smoke signals of Lemuria. An innkeeper greeted him warmly, telling him to be careful and offering him food for his travels. She suggested he and his companion buy supplies in the village and stay the night. As Luke left the establishment, he was unaware of the fate that awaited him. The next morning, the village's bountiful fields would be found ravaged, and he and his companion would become the prime suspects. He stood amidst the trees, his expression firm. With the location known in advance, dealing with the situation was a simple matter. He considered this particular event successfully concluded. He reflected that his food supply was only meant for 3 days. Thanks to Anita, however, the monsters in the cave were no longer a concern, which lightened his burden considerably. He decided it was a good opportunity to head toward the royal capital and contemplate his next phase of training. His path led him to the mouth of a dark cave. Peering inside, his attention was caught by a small, glowing object on the ground. He paused, wondering what it could be. As he stood at the entrance, a palpable weight settled over the area. He felt the sudden, oppressive shift in the atmosphere, questioning its source. The source of the feeling erupted from the cave's depths, a swirling, immense torrent of demonic power. He knew instantly that an unbelievably powerful master of magic lay ahead. His heart began to pound with a sudden, chilling fear for Anita's safety. Sweat beaded on his brow as his eyes widened in alarm. He fought to control his rising panic, telling himself not to be afraid, that he must not embrace terror. Steeling his resolve, he took a determined step forward into the oppressive gloom. Deeper within the cave, Anita stood perfectly calm, enveloped in a soft, ethereal aura. Before her, the massive boot of an unseen figure stood planted on the ground. From her vantage point, she saw Luke standing further in, his sword held ready at his side as he surveyed the cavern. She smiled warmly, her expression bright and welcoming. "Welcome back, Luke," she said. He could only stare, his surprise evident. "Anita," he stammered. She tilted her head, apologizing profusely for having made him worry. He stared in disbelief, a realization dawning on him. This immense power, the energy he mistook for a high-level demon, was hers. It was the magic of an S-rank adventurer. He finally understood that he had been completely misjudging Anita. She offered a gentle, closed-eye smile as she pointed a finger toward him. He stammered, trying to downplay his shock, insisting there was no need for such alarm. Her smile turned into a confident smirk as she continued to point, asking if his own magical power was about the same as hers. He was taken aback by the question, his eyes wide with surprise as the words magic power echoed in his mind. He looked away, confused. Anita explained that she had been unaware of her own power level. She elaborated that those born with immense magic often struggle to gauge it in others, and she had heard it was easier to compare with someone of a similar level. His embarrassment quickly turned to frustration. He exclaimed that Salamander should have told him, complaining that Anita should have mentioned from the start that her power was just stretching out. He felt foolish for sensing a high-level demon and rushing in, only to realize it was her all along. The tension broken, they sat together inside the cave. Between them, a small, cat-like version of the fire spirit salamander patted the ground contentedly. While eating, he asked if their training would be finished in 3 more days. Anita nodded as she swallowed, adding that it was a shame. She looked at him with sudden seriousness, her expression pleading. "Will you help me with my request?" she asked directly. He met her gaze, his own expression turning serious and contemplative as he considered her words. Anita stretches, her body limber, and announces that it's time for some rehabilitation. She turns to Luke with a smile, noting that he seems quite motivated for their mission. He readily agrees. Her expression softens as she apologizes for getting him involved. She confesses that it was a difficult choice to bring him along, but she couldn't have managed without him, acknowledging his strength. As they venture deeper into a dark cave, guided by a small, floating orb of light, Luke expresses his gratitude, mentioning that he's glad Anita taught him some magic. She replies that it will surely be a help. Their path is suddenly blocked by a colossal, shimmering wall of crystal that fills the cavern from floor to ceiling. Luke stares up at it, identifying it as a barrier. Anita admits that this isn't her specialty, but she believes she can manage to get them through. Luke, however, senses the dense magical power sealed within the barrier and realizes that even his wife's flame wouldn't be able to melt it easily. Raising a staff, Anita declares her intent to dispel the barrier. With a surge of energy, the crystalline wall shatters, unleashing a powerful shockwave. Luke watches, stunned by the incredible display of magical power. Within the swirling dust and debris of the destroyed barrier, a massive, scaly form begins to emerge, its heavy claws thudding against the stone floor. The creature reveals itself fully, a fearsome dragon with dark scales and a wild, white mane. With wide eyes, Anita identifies the beast, a poison dragon. In an instant, Luke's expression hardens into one of grim determination. He draws his sword, his body tensing as he prepares to face the monstrous threat. The poison dragon lets out a low growl. According to the Adventurers Guild, a dragon's threat is typically certified as A rank or higher. However, this particular dragon is an S-rank threat, the highest possible classification, a foe that even an A-rank adventurer like Anita should not be able to defeat alone. The great beast roars, its powerful wings unfurling within the confines of the cave. Facing the overwhelming threat, Luke understands that this is not an opponent he can challenge head-on. Despite this grim realization, his resolve does not waver. He reminds himself that he made a promise to help, to prevent the nearby village from being utterly destroyed. Later, having retreated to a safe distance, they sit by a campfire. Anita begins to explain the dragon's history, recounting how it had remained hidden for a long time before suddenly emerging to wipe out a village. Though the Adventurers Guild issued a subjugation request, she notes that the reward is so low that very few adventurers are willing to accept the mission. He asks why the reward is so meager. Anita explains it's because the nobles have not been directly affected, suggesting the ravaged land was likely of little value to them in the first place. Staring into the flames, she elaborates that high-ranking monster subjugation requests from the state or wealthy patrons always come with rewards befitting the difficulty. However, in this case, since the nobles haven't suffered any losses, they are content to ignore the problem, allowing the monster to remain at large. Luke voices his concern that if left alone, the dragon will eventually become a problem for the nobles as well. With a cunning smile, Anita reveals that the dragon is intelligent, deliberately targeting small, isolated villages to avoid attracting serious attention and thus being underestimated. Her expression hardens with resolve. That's why I decided to do it, she declares. Seeing this, a small smile forms on Luke's face as he remarks that she must possess a strong sense of justice. She turns away, her tone becoming somber. It isn't for such a grand reason, she confesses, but for a personal one. She once stayed in one of the villages that was attacked and feels indebted to its people for their kindness to her when she was just a fledgling. This quest is her way of repaying that debt. A sad, distant smile plays on her lips as she adds a final, painful detail. The person she wishes to repay is no longer alive. Hearing her story, Luke falls into a heavy silence, his expression unreadable. The campfire crackles, its flames seeming to acknowledge the weight of her confession. He steels his resolve, declaring that he will fight. From behind him, Anita affirms their plan, and with a firm command, he calls upon Salamander to ignite. She immediately springs into action, launching a volley of sharp ice projectiles that pepper the poison dragon's hide. While the beast is staggered by the assault, Luke rushes forward, bringing his heavy blade down in a powerful arc as he calls out the name of the attack, Ice Lance. His weapon strikes true, but he realizes with a grimace that the dragon's scales are too hard. Undeterred, he channels the great fire spirit, commanding a spirited flame to ride the gale and pierce the sky. He unleashes the fiery blaze strike directly at the dragon's flank. The fiery attack proves effective, and the dragon recoils with a roar of pain before taking to the sky. Anita notes that it won't be able to fly here and prepares her next spell, Aqua Waves. Her spell conjures a torrent of water that floods the ground, sealing the dragon's mobility. Luke recognizes her tactic, cornering the beast to create an opening. He understands his target is now clear. He stands his ground before the immense, cornered creature, presenting himself as the sole target. The dragon responds by unleashing a torrent of dark, noxious breath. A single thought flashes through his mind. He must evade it at all costs. He dives out of the path of the toxic blast, landing with perfect balance to unleash another blaze strike. Wounded, the dragon turns and retreats into a nearby cave, prompting an observation that has fled. But its escape is cut short as massive lances of ice erupt from the ground, blocking the cave entrance. Anita's voice rings out, declaring that it will not get away as she casts her Ice Lance spell. She watched intently as Luke lunged forward, his sword slicing through the air as he unleashed a fiery blaze edge attack. In response, she summoned a colossal aqua hammer, which slammed down upon the poison dragon. The beast roared as the water crashed over it. Anita noted with satisfaction that the dragon was weakened, just as she'd expected. Trapped within the barrier, it was now a vulnerable target. He called out to Anita, observing that the dragon was significantly weakened and that they should press their advantage. She agreed, affirming that her taking on the beast had been the correct strategy. If the dragon was too weak to even move, she reasoned, they could simply seal the barrier and leave it. But now, it was time to deliver the finishing blow. He then called upon Salamander, his sword igniting with brilliant flames to form Blaze Alma. With a determined cry, he charged forward, unleashing another blaze edge that struck the beleaguered dragon. The cavern floor was now a desolate landscape of ice and shattered earth. Amidst the destruction, Anita stood alone, surveying the scene. She planted her staff firmly into the ice, her focus absolute. Tiny motes of light began to swirl around her as she addressed the innumerable spirits in the area, pleading with them to lend her their strength. The spirits answered her call, their energy coalescing around her as she began to weave a pseudo-spirit art. The energy solidified into a colossal, shimmering crystal lance, which she hurled forward with immense force. With a determined shout, she commanded the lance onward. The crystal projectile found its mark, violently impaling the poison dragon and pinning it against the far wall of the cavern. Impaled and encased in crystal, the great beast's frozen prison begins to fracture. Sharp, snapping sounds echo as cracks spread across its crystalline surface. The fractures spread rapidly until the entire frozen form of the poison dragon explodes outward, shattering into 1,000 glittering shards that rain down upon the cavern floor. Watching the glittering dust settle, Luke stands beside a small, hovering orb of light. He murmurs to himself, questioning if the battle is truly over. His expression is one of cautious relief, his eyes fixed on the spot where the formidable enemy once stood. His contemplation is shattered as Anita joyfully leaps onto his back, exclaiming that they've won. She declares it was easier than she expected, all thanks to him. Caught off guard, Luke struggles under her weight, telling her to get off. She pays his protests no mind, playfully rubbing her cheek against his and teasingly asking if he's blushing. As they finally calm down, he looks back at the remains of their foe, confirming their victory. He's still amazed by what Anita accomplished, realizing her technique was a pseudo-spirit art that required convincing local minor spirits to cooperate, a brilliant but risky maneuver that could have easily failed. He turns to her, and she begins to explain. She confesses that she was actually bluffing, only trying to intimidate the creature. She reveals the monster was a Nemd, and because it was so powerful, she earned 2 titles for defeating it. With this victory, she exclaims, her name will surely become famous. Luke smiles, remarking that she's one step closer to becoming a hero. His smile fades as his attention is drawn past her to a dark hole left where the Nem's body had been. A bad feeling creeps over him. Anita, however, peers into the opening, wondering aloud what might lie deeper within. Before he can warn her further, a violent torrent of dark, viscous liquid erupts from the hole. The blast strikes Anita head-on, sending her reeling as Luke watches in shock. She stumbles backward, caught by Luke just as she begins to fall. He cries out her name in alarm, his eyes wide with shock as dark, feather-like remnants of the attack drift to the ground. He gently lowers her to the cavern floor, cradling her as she struggles to speak. With tears welling in her eyes and dark smudges marring her face, she apologizes, whispering that she may have failed. Before he can respond, a deep, guttural growl rumbles through the cave. From the oppressive darkness, another massive form emerges, its features identical to the beast they had just fought. Luke stares in horror, the words catching in his throat as he identifies it. A second poison dragon. The massive poison dragon growls, its fangs bared. Facing it, Luke holds the long-haired woman protectively, realizing with a grimace that he had miscalculated the enemy's strength, believing there to be only one. She tells him not to be scared. From a distance, the 2 humans appear small before the beast, but Luke notices something unexpected. The dragon itself is small. His eyes widen as the truth dawns on him. It's a child. He understood now. The dragon they had defeated was magnificent, but it had been hiding its young. It had concealed itself not in a large city, but in a small village, and its child had hidden alongside it. The memory surfaces of when they first found the nest, a cave of shimmering crystal, where a beautiful crystalline dragon resided. Luke realized it had been there all along, nesting with great care so as not to be discovered. He wondered what to do. The long-haired woman reminded him that with the situation reversed, she couldn't be counted as part of their fighting force. Her voice cut through his thoughts, warning that the young dragon was coming. She pointed out that even though it was a child, its body was nearly the size of an adult's, and if it had been trained by its parent, they would be in serious trouble. Spurred into action by her warning, Luke lunged to the side, narrowly evading a powerful swipe from the dragon's sharp claws. He dodged again as its tail whipped past him. The young dragon was far faster than its parent. Despite the danger, a look of determination crossed his face as he clenched his fist. This dragon, he decided, was his to tame. His gaze fell upon the crystalline remains nearby, and a devastating realization struck him. The fearsome parent dragon hadn't been attacking. It had been providing food for its child. He wondered if it had even kept any for itself. The full, tragic memory returned. The parent, trapped with its child behind a barrier, had received only a meager portion of food. On the verge of starvation, the cornered parent was then killed by the very humans who had trapped them. That history now fueled the towering beast before him. The poison dragon, consumed by rage, was rampaging. He steadied himself, sword held loosely, and met the dragon's gaze. He understood its rage, acknowledging that the beast wasn't the only one who remembered such anger. Though his intended target was already gone, he couldn't simply stand by and do nothing. In response, the poison dragon's throat began to swell and glow, gathering energy for a breath attack. Luke recognized the signs immediately, but noted that the creature was taking an unusually long time to charge its power. But instead of aiming forward, the dragon suddenly tilted its head back, pointing its charged maw directly at the ceiling of the cavern. The abrupt change in direction left Luke stunned, wondering why it had aimed upwards. With a deafening roar, the dragon unleashed a concentrated beam of dark energy straight into the sky. The sheer force of the blast threw Luke backward, forcing him to brace against the violent shockwave. The beam tore a massive hole in the cavern's roof, causing rocks and debris to rain down around him. He held his ground, sword at the ready, as the woman with the long hair watched the destruction unfold from a safe distance. As the dust began to settle, a sudden gust of wind whipped through the enclosed space. Confused, Luke looked around, questioning what was happening and why a breeze would suddenly appear inside a cave. His gaze traveled upward, following the source of the wind to the gaping hole in the ceiling, from which small fragments of rock were still falling. The long-haired woman stared up in shock. She realized with growing horror that the dark void above wasn't the night sky, but the interior of another, even larger cave. From that darkness, a colossal, leathery wing unfurled, descending into the cavern below. The massive creature landed with a ground-shaking thud. Luke yelled out to Anita, realizing with alarm that this new beast had no intention of escaping. He shouted that they couldn't let it get away, as they both prepared to face the towering new threat. He clings desperately to the poison dragon's back as it thrashes through the air. Behind him, Anita shouts for him to hold on, reassuring him that she is all right, but warning him to be careful not to be thrown off. The dragon puts distance between them and the cavern, flying swiftly over the rugged terrain. It suddenly lurches in the air, forcing Luke to tighten his grip as he glances back with a start. He calls out, asking where the dragon is taking them. He reasons that there shouldn't be any villages nearby, but they can't go too far. He then shouts a command, calling for Salamander to use its fire. In response, a brilliant burst of flame erupts, quickly taking the form of the great fire spirit, Salamander. The spirit lunges forward, its fiery form impacting the dragon's side and enveloping it in a swirling vortex of flame. The impact sends Luke tumbling from the dragon's back, and he hits the ground hard, rolling to a stop. He looks up in alarm, realizing that if this continues, Salamander will destroy the dragon. He scrambles to his feet, his immediate concern forgotten as he finds himself standing in the middle of a quiet, unfamiliar village. Confused, he looks around, questioning how a village could possibly be here. He recalls that the reference materials showed nothing of the sort. His thoughts are cut short by a piercing scream as the head of the poison dragon appears over the roof of a nearby house. The beast comes crashing down, smashing through the building's roof. Two villagers scramble away in terror, one screaming that it's a dragon, while the other cries out in horror that there are people inside the collapsing house. He stood amidst the chaos, demanding to know what was happening. A frantic villager could only gesture wildly, screaming that she had no idea. His confusion turned to alarm as the downed poison dragon began to stir. He yelled out that he didn't recognize this village and urged everyone to evacuate towards the main road. With a deafening crash, the dragon unfurled its massive wings, sending splinters of wood and debris flying as he flinched from the piercing sound. The beast then let out a tremendous, earth-shaking roar that echoed through the valley. The sheer force of the sound wave struck Luke and the nearby villagers, forcing them to cover their ears in pain. The roar carried across the entire settlement, a signal of the unfolding disaster. Deep within the surrounding woods, the roar did not go unnoticed. The heads of wild beasts, a feral wolf, a sharp-toothed rabbit, snapped to attention, their instincts ignited by the sound. In a thundering stampede, a horde of monsters burst from the treeline, charging with ferocious speed towards the source of the disturbance. They descended upon the village outskirts, a wave of claws and teeth that sent the terrified villagers scattering in every direction. A villager cried out in terror, pointing as even more monsters appeared. A griffin-like creature dove from above, sinking its talons into one of the charging wolves. Luke watched, horrified, realizing it wasn't just the dragon. The entire area was swarming with monsters, and they were now turning on each other. He surveyed the pandemonium, the injured dragon, the battling beasts, the helpless villagers. The thought solidified in his mind with chilling certainty. Trying to fight the dragon while also protecting these people was an impossible task for him. But as despair threatened to consume him, a fleeting image of the heroine appeared at his side. His expression hardened, a single, unwavering command cutting through the noise and fear. He had to protect them. He stood firm, sword at the ready, issuing a clear command. There would be no sacrifices. As he spoke, a colossal bear monster lunged, and he shoved a villager to safety, yelling for him to run as the beast's clawed paw descended. He braced himself, catching the full force of the blow on his blade. This, he knew, was his trial, a test he had to pass to protect everyone. Shoving the monster back, his eyes scanned the chaos. The villagers were overwhelmed, desperately short on defenders. He realized that a village this size should have adventurers, but none were in sight. Just then, a voice called his name. It was the elf heroine, admonishing him for trying to sacrifice himself alone. She then intercepted a powerful body blow from the poison dragon, shielding him from the attack. The sheer force of the impact sent her reeling through the air. The shockwave alone was enough to hit Luke, forcing blood from his mouth as he collapsed to the ground while she cried out his name. He pushed himself up, his sword glowing with a soft light. It was no problem. He thought he could still fight. This was precisely why he had learned recovery magic. A wave of healing energy washed over him. As his strength returned, a man in armor called out, asking if he was all right. Luke looked up to see three figures battling the monsters with practiced ease. He realized with a surge of hope, adventurers. He could still do this. The adventurers turned their attention from the smaller beasts to the true threat. They froze, stunned by the sight of the poison dragon. Luke sensed their hesitation. They were overwhelmed by the creature's immense and sinister magical aura. Seeing their fear, he knew he could not hesitate. He surged past the stunned adventurers, sword raised, and charged directly at the colossal dragon. He declares his intention to defeat the dragon himself. The adventurers behind him are aghast, with one calling it reckless for him to fight alone. With a determined roar, he clenches his fist and implores them to trust him. He then unleashes a powerful swing, his blade arcing through the air, wreathed in a dark, crackling energy. A fierce resolve fills his eyes as he internally affirms his identity. Luke Ventima, a man stronger than any other. His conviction stuns the adventurers into silence. Finally, one of them acknowledges his resolve. Luke glances back, a confident smile on his face. Turning his back to them, he walks toward his foe. The armored adventurer calls out, entrusting that side of the battle to him. Luke's focus narrows onto the poison dragon, which has now turned its attention to him, seemingly ignoring the other adventurers. The great beast hisses, its voice dripping with venom. It recognizes Luke, identifying him as its parent's killer. It had assumed Luke had fled with the others, but now realizes the truth. He was merely a decoy, buying time for the villagers to escape. Unfazed, Luke holds his ground, sword at the ready. He calmly states that the dragon has underestimated him from the very beginning, and that he is fine with that. His eyes begin to glow with power. He announces that from this point forward, he will constantly deploy salamanders, raise Alma, and tells the dragon to prepare for the consequences as a fiery aura erupts around it.